Hey guys, it's Clay on the trail. Another coronavirus lockdown build that I'm doing is a big one. This one will probably take me 2 weeks, and I'm guessing will be in multiple parts. Not really sure how I'm going to do it. There are other builds of these on YouTube, so this isn't necessarily a how-to build video. This is what I'm doing to keep myself from going stir crazy. And it's going to offer me some really great trips coming up. I'm actually really excited about this one. So this build is a Chesapeake Lightcraft 17LT. It is a touring kayak. The reason I'm so excited about this build is I have 2 trips in mind right now that are just going to be crazy, crazy, crazy long, big trips. One of them will be in the Wind Rivers and the other one on Yellowstone Lake. Multi-day trips, fishing, multi-overnighter. Just a great, great adventure that I'm looking forward to. I've always wanted a kayak, but they're horribly, horribly expensive. I bought a full kit, which was horribly expensive. But what I was able to do with that kit, the reason I sprung for it, I could have built one for probably 3/4 price, not buying the kit, just buying the material, but it wouldn't allow me to do this. Okay, I don't know, this might be hard to see. I took all the pieces from the kit and traced them out on Coroplast. So I basically have patterns to build more. So I did jump ahead yesterday and I started this build without bringing you guys along. I'm not going to say that I'm one day in it, but I'm really one real working day into it. This is a 17-foot kayak that I'm building in my garage. They shipped it to me in a, I don't even know, 6-7 foot box. So a lot of this is just gluing the pieces together, epoxying the pieces together to get them in the full length. And now everything is cured for 24 hours. I'm going to take all of the pieces apart, and this is a stitch and glue kayak with Okumi plywood. So I think to build one of these, hardware and everything, just to go purchase the material would run between $700 and $800. The kit was a little, well, more than that. But as I showed before, I have all the pieces traced out on the Coroplast, the corrugated plastic. I could build a dozen of these, and maybe I will put a couple for sale, and they would pay for the build that I'm doing myself. And I may do a couple different than this. This is my first boat build. I do have a handmade cedar strip kayak, canoe, that I love. I've been on a lot of great trips with, but I didn't build it. So this has always been something I've wanted to try. So I jumped the gun on when I said the next step would be to be putting these together. I am cleaning up the fiberglass, the spare stuff, and then I will be gluing there's like one inch, 1.5 inch strips that go on the top of these. So when everything's glued together, there's the boards for the top deck to screw on. So I will be gluing this for one more day. Each series of glue takes 24 hours to cure. So starting tomorrow, I will actually start wiring and assembling the boat into the shape of the hull. So, little bit at a time. All right, this is day 3 on this kayak build. Last night I was able to get the shear clamps put on the sides. I made a bunch of little clamps out of PVC pipe. They work surprisingly well. I know everybody says to do that, but I just had my doubts about it. But man, they worked awesome. Hasn't quite been 24 hours, but everything seems pretty well set up. I put some halogen lights on this workbench last night. It got below freezing outside. I keep my garage 60-ish something with those halogen lights, brought it up into the 70s just over top this project here. And everything glued and dried spectacularly. So I'm going to disassemble everything. We'll set everything up to start stitching it together. Here is the sides stitched together with the copper wire. Spreader bar intact. The first time it actually starts looking like a boat. Get the bottom stitched together and stitch to the sides. This thing is finally starting to look like a boat. I just spent hours drilling and stitching and drilling and stitching. Got it all put together. Work's looking good. Got both of the 2x4s running across it, lined up, so it's good and square. It's getting late tonight, so tomorrow will be a new day. I will come out, and I believe the next step is to start gluing it together. So it'll get a layer of epoxy on all the seams. And then it'll become solid, where I can start putting the cross supports and things in and epoxying the inside. Today's work involved installing the bulkheads and mixing the epoxy with wood flour to glue the pieces together, and then the storage areas got a thin layer of fiberglass and then completely epoxied. The cockpit got a full layer of epoxy. Everything was really sticky today. I used a lot of epoxy. I didn't take much video. Didn't really want this stuff all over my camera. So it is coming along again. I think it said within something like 8 to 72 hours to apply a second coat to everything, and then I'll be flipping it and working on the outside. So, starting to look like a boat. This is where you sit, and that is the front. I'm trying to learn all the names of this thing. I think it's aft, stern, and I'm still working on the sides. I'll get those down. Good morning. It is the next day. About 10 hours later, the glass is dry enough to do a second coat on. It's not dry, but it's dry enough. It came out, I think, just like it's supposed to. You're supposed to still be able to see the contour of the glass. If you can't see the contour of the fiberglass, then you've put too much on. So I'm going to trim the edges, the unsaturated fiberglass. Yeah, he's mad at me. We haven't been outside hiking or anything in like over a month. Anyway, I'm going to trim this off, put a second coat on it, flip it over, and start cutting wires, unstitching. With this glued together, it should be stiff enough to support itself now. Second coat on the inside, the interior. Now, for my first one, I think I ended up with pretty smooth curves. Got a lot of wires to cut, a lot of wires to pull. There will be some sanding for sure. I see a couple spots I wish were prettier, but pretty happy so far. All right, this is the actual cockpit, the boat. I have done fiberglass before. This isn't my first job. I'm just happy. I'm happy the way this turned out. Yeah, there's a lot of bubbles and flaws and stuff in it. I made a mistake. I actually used the 3-inch wide little tape pieces over the fillets, and then fiberglass the whole thing. Didn't need to use the 3-inch pieces. So I got a lot of bubbles where I doubled it. Other than that, I think it turned out really good. Where gear goes and stuff, not as beautiful, but purposely not as beautiful. I didn't take the time on it. Hey, I took a plane to the tail. Sorry, I keep getting excited about this. The lines on this thing are so... like there's no bubbles in it. It's smooth. It goes from a point and it just fares out. This thing is going to be so fast in the water. And with a fairly flat bottom in the center, not completely flat, it's going to be stable. I'm really excited to get this in the water. I'm bummed at the prospect of building this thing in the winter. Every body of water around here is frozen solid. I do have one possibility in the works, borrowing a swimming pool, but I've got to work the details out on that yet. I don't have it for sure. But got the nose all squared out. There's a lot of sanding. All the wires are sticking out just a little proud. A lot of sanding to do, and then getting ready to put some glass on this thing. And the bottom half will be completed. I just spent a huge amount of time sanding. Where the pieces of plywood came together, you know, they had square edges, and I've just rounded everything over. So they jive together. And then where all the wires were sticking out, they were sharp. And I went through a lot of discs on my sander because the wires were chewing everything up. But I have laid out the fiberglass. Today's kind of a big day. I haven't glassed anything in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years since I did a repair job on the inside of my canoe. But I've learned a lot watching the videos of guys making this thing. So one thing is that, you know, fiberglass cloth doesn't stretch. The weave, you can brush it and it fits the form. It doesn't need to be full of bubbles and stuff. So I'm going to take the next probably 30 minutes and just brush this thing till the fiberglass is laying exactly how I want it. And then it is time to mix up a whole bunch of epoxy and give this thing its first coat, the bottom coat. So I'm going with a clear finish. I'm not going to paint it. So I've sanded it and made it as beautiful as I can. It's my first kayak. So I hope that I gave it enough detail that when I'm done, it comes together. So on to the epoxy. First coat of epoxy applied. Sexy, sexy. Look at the curves. Looking good. I gotta let this dry, but not completely dry, and I'll apply the second coat and it gets some sort of bond. There's a name for it. A chemical bond, I guess, or otherwise you have to scuff it before you put a second coat on. So back to another project. I let the first coat dry for about 8 hours. I put it on early this morning. I trimmed all the glass, the fiber cloth off, and I just rolled on a second coat. We'll let it dry till morning. Then we'll hit it with one more, I think, possibly touching up spots on a second coat. It's starting to look pretty. So it has been like 2 weeks since I've had a chance to work on my boat. My son bought a house and it had to be remodeled, and he had to be moved in by the 31st. So we worked around the clock for about, I don't know, 13, 14 days, something like that, and got him all remodeled and moved in. So I don't know where I left off. So hopefully this segue goes smoothly anyway. Speaking of smoothly, I just sanded the fiberglass with 40 grit, then 120 grit, and then 240 grit. And I've got rid of all the drips, all the bumps, irregularities. And I've wiped it down with water is all. And it came out pretty good. Now there are some places where you can see the weave of the cloth. And I'm going to leave it. This is not a show boat. This is a usable boat. I plan on doing a lot of exploring and a lot of adventuring with this thing. And the thing that the book says is the more fiberglass or the epoxy you put on, the heavier the boat is. It might look prettier, but it doesn't make it any stronger. It just makes it heavier. So with that in mind, I have just exact amount of coats in it to fill the weave of the cloth and make it strong. It's sanded. I think it's beautiful. It's not perfect, but when I pull this thing up on the gravelly shore of whatever lake I take it to next, it's going to get some scratches in it anyway, because again, not taking this to shows to show it off. I am going to go and use it. So the next step, I will be flipping it over and putting all the the little hoops across the top. I'll have to remember the name of them. And so we can start working on the top. Okay, got the deck beam on. That's what it was called. It's got to dry for 24 hours. But there's things I can do working around it. This is a, 16-degree radius. And it goes, and it just shows what angle I need to plane these boards down in order to make the top fit good. So, I mean, old school, my old Craftsman block plane has a different angle that fits the front than the back, and then right here between the back seat of the cockpit and the bow beam, it changes from the 16 to the 49 degree angle. This is some good physical work here. I'm making lots of wood shavings, but it's coming along nicely. Next step was to install the deck. I had to put a coat of fiberglass on the underneath side, so when water gets inside it doesn't penetrate the wood, and then hurry and put it on before it hardened, or I wouldn't be able to get this shape out of it. Lots and lots and lots of little nails. So my next step will be to cut the excess off, level with, even with the edges of the boards, and where these two come together, I'll take this and I'll cut this so it'll sit down all nice and straight. I have trimmed the deck, planed it, and then sanded it and rounded over the edges so there's no sharp edges. And this is my first build, so I've learned a couple of things. I did not bring the board inside. I did not plane it down enough, so I ended up with a big gap right here. It flows. It'll cover with the fiberglass. Man, but it just isn't gonna look right. I may mix up some epoxy and some of the wood flour and fill some of this up, but there it is, all sanded. Ready for some fiberglass. I get on a roll every now and then and I just forget that I'm making videos. So I've done quite a bit since I've shown you the boat last. It's been several weeks. I've been working on it just a little bit here and there, so let me get caught up. I've done a lot of sanding. I've got all the coats of glass to where I want them. I ordered some spar varnish that will be here next week. And that's almost the next coat. I cut the hatch for the front and the back. Had a little spot that didn't glue, so I've got it going. And then again on this, had the little stiffener on the inside. So there's plywood that goes all the way around this. That doubles this, it just makes it a little stiffer. And then I've gone around with the epoxy and wood flour, like peanut butter, and run a fillet around all of those. Also, there is the layer of my boat, a layer of plywood, another layer of plywood, and then this top piece that creates a lip called for the combing. And I've got it all quarter rounded and sanded, nailed on. I've actually put this down on the ground and sat in, and it's not as hard to get in and out of as I thought it was going to be. So I do have the hatch covers already made. I made them quite a while ago. They have the boards that create the shape and epoxy on them, but they're just bare wood on the top. So once I have all this stuff epoxy down, it'll be tomorrow. I'll put a clear coat of epoxy on these, and then it's a matter of varnish. Putting all the varnish on, getting this thing. I bought some high gloss varnish, so this thing should be pretty sunshiny. I'm trying to come up with a logo or something to put on them. Every boat should have a name. All right, these are my hatch covers. I have got 2 coats of just fiberglass resin on them. They're curing. Let me take you over here. My kayak. is all sanded, and it looks all dingy and, you know, dull. It's because it's been sanded. When I put the spar varnish on it, it will be a high gloss. So the reason it's on its side, I came up with a logo. I am a firm believer in telling people to get lost. One, to get away from me because I don't like people, but number two is I'm going to take this boat out into the wilderness and I'm going to go lose myself. So that's my logo. Any of you old school punk rockers will recognize where I stole half my logo from. I have fiberglassed, just resin the rims and the coaming, the cockpit area. I had a couple spots where it didn't glue together as well as I wish it had. So I've actually put it on its side, put some tape in there, and I filled some holes to make this watertight. And the hatch rim, I've got glass on it. So this is a matter of it drying. I will give it a final sand, very little final sand, and put a coat of spar varnish on it. I bought spar varnish instead of spar urethane. It's way better. It's natural materials and it's supposed to be way better, but holy mama, stuff was like 45 bucks for a quart. So got to come up with a booth. I'm going to actually create a room right here in this space that is completely plastic. Plastic on the ground, plastic walls, and probably a plastic ceiling. I'm not sure about the ceiling. But where I go in there, once I start laying this down, it attracts dust, and every speck of dust leaves a mark in your finish. So got to create a dust-free environment, including clothes. So I'm going to have to like put brand new clothes on, seal this off, and then put the final coat on it. Then it's a matter of putting, you know, the hardware on it and the seat in it, and it is ready to go. So I'm getting very close and I'm very excited. Okay, my final steps. I got 2 coats of the high UV spar varnish. I actually used an Epiphanes high gloss. It's an actual spar varnish, not a spar urethane. It's a little better, a little tougher. I did come up with a logo for the boat. Got that all covered in. Got my hatch covers in. The webbing. I got the backrest in all the way in my seat. Need to glue the foam for the actual sit pad in. And there is the final product, finished product. Lots of shininess. I have some sanding still to do. There's some really uneven areas in it. But total excitement, ready to put this thing in some water and see how she floats. This just opened up a lot of adventure that I just didn't have the means to do before. I guess that's going to be it for this video. What do I think? Well, I have one. I need another one. That's what I think. I won't be buying the full kit next time. I'll be just buying the pieces. Like I said before, I traced all the pieces out. Looking forward to doing another one. I may actually cedar strip the top instead of doing the plywood top on it. It'll be a little more difficult, but it'll give me a little freedom to do a little more design, a little better work. And I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to putting this in some water and getting some use out of it. So thanks for coming along. If you would please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, feel free to share. And well, as always, get out and explore. But I guess go get lost too.